with second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 358. Now what? A Twisted Sisterhood? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with, soon to be here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks. He is not here yet, but will be. And the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And in the background, handling all of the things, we have the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez. And tonight we're taking a break from USAspending.gov because it's mind-numbing. So just to be honest, and mind-numbing is not good for me today. So I decided to look around at what's happening in the news with the biggest antagonists. And so the National Organization for Women apparently has a crisis. So we're going to talk about what's happening with now. But before we get into that, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences, both recent and long past, have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, without further ado, that's basically the end of that. And as to what's happening with now, we have this lovely article, which this website is not one that I had been all that familiar with. So when I saw the headline and I went to the news article and started reading, there were a couple of stories I looked at, and this is one that at least does have a description. There were some stories, and they weren't about this in particular, but a lot of them, their about page was kind of nondescript or blank, and this one it puts it right out there. So this is not the right, poking at now. This is actually the left. You can see in the about page, they've got like all the little hallmarks here. And I don't know. The 19th is the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. So I kind of expected this to be more of a left-wing thing, but this is basically a feminist publication, I think. So it says, a century ago, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution made voting our country's most fundamental mode of civic participation, a right regardless of gender, which the first sentence of it, and I take issue with what's our most fundamental mode of civic participation. But this watershed moment in our democracy excluded millions of women, particularly women of color, from the ballot box for generations. The 19th Amendment passed, during the beginning part of the 20th century. So I don't know how many generations they think have passed. But in any case, the reality is suffrage remains a work in progress for many in this country, particularly people living in the states where voter suppression exists and tens of thousands of transgender Americans who face who face barriers to voting. Again, that's not necessarily very well written. Today,
What
women make up.
barriers?
Yeah.
Has there ever been a no transgenders voting?
No, I think it's
That's why
them
they
going
were
voter
invented
ID.
half a
Yeah.
lifetime ago.
I think they're going after the voter ID laws because there's this myth that if you're trans, you can't get ID with your new name on it with the correct gender that you identify with. And so you can't get ID that would let you identify as yourself. And yes, you can. So it's baloney. But in any case, you kind of get the gist. Then they go on down here. They touch on protests. Women make up more than half of the American electorate and are more engaged than ever in our politics. That women vote at higher rates than men, run for local office, seek the presidency, but are underrepresented in government and in the nation's executive ranks. So CEOs, they're talking about CEOs there. Women in LGBTQ plus equals divided by 0. Sorry, and don't blow up. Are underrepresented in politics and policy journalism and newspaper leadership, which influences what stories are told, how the news is covered, and whose voices are elevated. So that's the angle they're coming from here is definitely pro-feminist, pro-women's voting rights, pro-whatever else feminism stands for, and they're clearly intersectional. So if anybody's like, oh, this website's anti-feminist, you can't believe anything they say about what's going on. No, this is from the horse's mouth. Maybe not the horse, but one of the horses in the stable. Same stable. And yeah, we already got repeal from Mr. 303 in rumble.com. And it's in the last few weeks, as we've been going over the issues with women in the military and how that has affected it, like they need a whole area of operations just to deal with ideas of sexual harassment and sexual assault now because of this. It's not cost effective to have women in the military. If you go back farther on HBR Talk, we had a pretty long discussion about how suffrage evolved, the actual franchise itself, in nations governed by or guided by English common law. And if women really can't be in the military, then there really isn't a good excuse for women to have voting rights. So these people really wouldn't like me. They probably call me a man. So the headline here, toxic, quote, end quote, toxic work environment. Just in case it's not really toxic. At the largest U.S. feminist group, prompts president to leave. And now, what struck me about this headline is they instated this president. They hired this president as a result of a shakeup with the previous administration of the National Organization for Women.
Let me guess, it was too racist.
Yes,
and
actually.
What we're about to find out, ladies and gentlemen, is it's still too racist.
Yeah, she had to leave because of racism at Now. That was the scandal. There were all kinds of complaints. And that all resulted in the installation of Christian F. Nunez. I believe it's Nunez, like, just Nunez. Anyway, so she details her experience at the National Organization for Women. People were harder on me as a black woman, she says. National Organization for Women, their history, they pushed for, or rather against equally shared parenting laws. They pushed for maintaining the status quo over and over and over again when men's rights activists and other groups had been pushing for way back in the day joint custody, when it was normal for post-divorce, one parent would have custody and the other parent would have visitation. And prior to no-fault divorce existing, it defaulted to maternal custody and paternal child support if the mother didn't abandon the marriage. If the mother did something that showed that she might be a bad mother, like bad character, just having a string of men visit her house might keep her from having custody, because the court system back then recognized the fact that getting a new uncle, in quote unquote uncle, every week can be traumatic to a child and cause issues with development, and so on. Also puts the child in danger because you are bringing people through that themselves may not be of great character and may not take the best care, may neglect the child, and so on. But in any case, when the push came through for joint custody, the National Organization for Women warned everybody and published manifestos and went to Congress and testified and sent them letters and so on, that basically said that if judges had to consider fathers' rights, and fathers could get joint custody by default if there was not anything proven wrong with their parenting, that there'd be more child abuse. And that didn't happen. We didn't have an increase in child abuse. Then there was the push for shared parenting, which was essentially joint custody and visitation, but with the father having more legal responsibility and more legal rights. So you have the right to help make medical decisions for your kid, or you have the right to know what's going on at school, your child's school, things like that, even if the child doesn't live with you full time, to have parent-teacher conferences and so on. But it still was basically every other weekend and a couple of evening visits a week. So there were still a disproportionate amount of mommy time and not so much daddy time. And now fought that, and they also used that same manifesto. There will be this horrible issue of men are going to be beating their children to death. Didn't happen. And as men's rights activists and other groups have fought to get equally shared parenting as the default in various states in the United States, they've fought that with the same claims that there would be this massive uptick in child abuse because they only want custody of their kids so they don't have to pay child support, and that they're going to beat their kids, they're going to neglect their kids, they're going to leave their kids with a babysitter, which the custodial mothers did all the time. In fact, fathers had to pay for daycare, but couldn't have extra daddy time when the mom wanted to use daycare. Judges wouldn't say to mothers, well, if you need daycare, leave the kid with dad. They would say, well, dad, you got to pay for daycare, which seems kind of dumb to me. But in any case, that's been the pattern. That's how now approaches all their issues. They've been that way with regard to abortion. They panic monger instead of talking about medical information and facts. They've been that way with regard to marriage. They treat marriage like it's a prison for women, and you shouldn't get involved in it. So that's the angle that we're looking at. The environment that is being described as racist and toxic starts from a position of that environment does all of its advocacy based on lies.
It's about time that now ate itself. Like everything is set up for these people to eat each other, but it's been a hell of a long time, and they've continued just to eat men instead.
Yeah.
They've run out of men, and now they're running on fumes, toxic fumes, apparently, but they're not toxic masculine fumes.
So what you're
Or are
saying
they?
is that there are gaseous clouds around her anus?
Yes, that
Yeah.
sounds about right.
Okay. So the president of the National Organization for Women has announced that she will not seek re-election after 5 years of leading the country's largest and oldest feminist organization.
That's also debatable. It's been around since 1966. Though Women's Institute has been around since 1897. Formed in Canada, if you can believe it. So I guess they didn't call themselves feminists at the time, but they blatantly are. And whoever was in charge of Seneca Falls, maybe wasn't an organization, but it was definitely feminist. 1966 cannot possibly be the oldest feminist organization, but possibly the largest, and maybe that's what they mean. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely not the oldest organization in the United States that behaves like a bunch of feminists. But they are probably the oldest that label themselves feminist and are still in operation. And they are intrinsically connected within the U.S. government, so there is that issue as well. They do get consulted on a lot of things. They were involved in the creation, for instance, of the Violence Against Women Act, which updated, again with the scare quotes, because it really kind of replaced, in a way, the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act that was 10 years old at the time. And the original act did everything that feminists said we needed the Violence Against Women Act in order to achieve. The one thing that it didn't do was gender everything to exclude men from any kind of protection under intimate partner and sexual violence law, or exempt women from any kind of accountability under that law. And the original Violence Against Women Act, that's a Freudian slip, because I do consider things like false allegations to be violence. That's an act of violence, getting somebody kidnapped, thrown into a cage, and hauled out and psychologically tortured, and then thrown back into the cage repeatedly. That's violent.
No, Hannah, your words speaking out against it are the violence.
Yep, totally.
And so is your silence.
Yep, and also, also I have to be a man again for a little while, because I'm sure somebody has done the thing. You're a man. But in any case, they replaced it with language in VAWA that pretty much made it clear that the federal government considered this only a crime when men did it, and women were the victims of it. That it wasn't considered a crime when women did it or men were the victims. So it made it very difficult then if men called for help anywhere, whether it was police, whether it was victims shelters, whether it was like going to their psychiatrist or psychologist, to their minister, any kind of setup to help victims of domestic violence or rape victims, they pretty much had nowhere to turn. And if it was domestic violence, it was really dangerous to call the police. If you called the police, you were more likely to get arrested than your perpetrator to get arrested. And you're more likely... there's actually research that shows this, and I can't remember. I just cited this too in a conversation. But you're more likely, even when it's proved that you didn't defend yourself or anything, to be prosecuted, where even if your perpetrator is arrested, she's more likely to have her charges dropped. And so for men, it's like 17% of arrests shown in this research actually got prosecuted, were perpetrators that actually got prosecuted, and the rest, either the perpetrator had her charges dropped, or the victim was arrested and possibly prosecuted. So you had like something like a 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 chance of actually, or the other way to put it, 4 or 5 out of 6 to have no good results from calling the cops. If you know, because of the Violence Against Women Act, because of the stipulations that gendered the crime and the state's response to the crime, and all of the funding was gendered as well. So if you wanted to start like a men's shelter, and you wanted to start a system for men to be able to just extract themselves from an abusive relationship, that wasn't going to happen, because you were promoting helping men, and you were not specializing in helping women. You would be turned down for your 501c3 application, and you would not get any funding. And of course, if you try to do it independently, you're relying on people's donations. That's more unstable, and it also led to, in Florida at least, there was harassment of the organization by other organizations and by the state. So you get this sort of double whammy of, not only does the state refuse to help men and punish men for seeking help, but the state also refuses to just allow the neighbors, like anybody in the country, the citizen, to help men either. And that's all a result of NOW and other organizations that specialize in women. And when I say in women, I mean in using women as a social battering ram to get funding for their grifts. So I'm not surprised about this at all, this toxicity. So NOW's next president will be elected during the group's national conference upcoming in July here. That's funny. They do it during Patriot Month. Christian F. Nunes, the current leader, is the second Black woman to serve as a national president since NOW's funding in 1966. So the rest have all been white. Nunes initially cited a desire to focus on her family, particularly her young son, as the reason for her departure. In an exclusive interview with the 19th, however, Nunes alleged that the toxic work environment at NOW was another key factor in her decision to exit. So I kind of wonder, is she talking about the toxic environment because she got shit for saying she was going to focus on her son? Or was she saying she was going to focus on her son because she would get shit for talking about the toxic environment?
I'm guessing they gave her shit because she called him her son. Like, how dare you assume his gender? How old is he? How old is he? 16. It still doesn't matter. You can still cut his dick off. How very dare you? Or even if he was 1 year old, how dare you call a 1-year-old boy a boy? You can still cut his. I'll stop going down that road.
To mention the issue of throwing over all of the women in the United States, because NOW claims to represent all of the women in the United States, even though some of us absolutely hate the organization, for a boy, even if it's her son. So let's see. She says, I think people were harder on me as a Black woman. Notice, by the way, we have the capital Black, right? I don't know if they actually have the word white in the article, so we'll see if they do. There's a thing.
And there's the telltale prefix as a.
Yeah,
Whenever anyone starts a fucking clause with as a, my fucking brain switches off.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing the thing. You know the thing.
Yeah. Well, I coined a word this week to describe feminists, calling people men as their whole argument in response to things people say that feminists don't like. You're a man. And that's the word is you're a man. I got you're a man. So if you you say, hey, we should be focusing a little more about workplace safety. But I think we should focus on areas where jobs are more dangerous, even if those are primarily male dominated, and it's not going to benefit women. And somebody comes back with you're a man. No, you've just been you're a man. So maybe we can coin the as a cult.
Oh yeah, she's not just a black woman; she's an assa black woman.
Yep, it's part of the as a cult. I am speaking for the entire population of people that have this thing in common with me. I'm part of the as a cult. So as a black woman, they were harder on her. Nunes told the 19th this month, which is possible, but it's also possible that she is feeling targeted. And it just kind of depends. We don't necessarily get all the information from one news article. And I don't know if there'll be more news articles on this. There were news articles on the initial scandal about toxic, racist environment at the National Organization for Women 5 years ago. And we covered at least one. I don't remember whether we did it in a main show or a patron only after show. But we did talk about it at the time that it happened, because I remember looking up stories for that because of it being such a powerful organization and such a leadership among women, a bastion of leadership among women, that women look to the National Organization for Women to decide how they're going to vote and what they think about particular issues, and just about everything from who they vote for president to when they should take a shit. Like, they're that powerful among women who identify as feminist. But then again, there are also feminists that don't like them. But that's a whole other episode.
I would think they're not allowed to be harder on her as a black woman. There's such a thing as a TERF, but there's no such thing as a birth. That's been outlawed in feminism for a long time. Since 100 years ago, sure, when they had that thing that intersectionalist feminists call white feminists, the ones that wanted black women to abort their children and fought tooth and nail to get black women to abort their children, and they're still doing well on that front. Again, maybe that's what they were on about. Your son's not
the ones
too old.
that oppose
Your son's not too old to abort, lady.
Yeah. The ones who opposed the 15th Amendment being passed before the 19th Amendment. And there's a lot of talk about how, it was because the 15th Amendment would give a whole bunch more men the right to vote when women didn't have the right yet. But I think the reality was many of the white women who fought for voting rights, if they'd have gotten the 19th Amendment passed, if it had been the 15th Amendment, and things were the other way around, and the fight for the 19th was the fight for black voting rights, not one of those women would have stood up for it. In fact, they probably would have continued to oppose it. I really believe that, especially with what some of the quotes that have come out from some of the most prominent suffragettes in American history said about black men. I think they would have just flat out said, yeah, only upper class white people should be voting. Because they still wanted stipulations that, you had to be a property owner and stuff like that. The same thing was happening in the UK, only it was more in regard to poverty versus being, a high tax paying property owner. And the suffragettes in the UK, not the suffragists who were working on a universal vote, but the suffragettes who were just focused on women's voting rights, they they manipulated the lower classes and said a lot of things about, voting rights and sisterhood and stuff like that. But what they were pushing for was voting rights with the caveat that you had to have that qualification, that economic qualification. So the poor classes still would not have gotten voting rights under the policies that the suffragettes wanted. And they didn't get what they wanted, but they still tried to take ownership of what did happen, even though it really wasn't influenced by the suffragettes. It was influenced by other factors. So she goes on. When I came in, it was in the middle of COVID. I came in during a period of crisis for the organization, but it was no grace. There was no sympathy for the things I was handling. I was just thrown into it, so I had to just swim or sink. So just to give you an idea, quite frequently in the business world, this is kind of a business, but it's I think now is nonprofit, but it's still basically run like a business. So the president is similar to being like a CEO. But when you have a company like Walmart or Marathon Oil, or any big company that has a huge amount of funds that they're dealing with, a huge amount of business that they're dealing with, and a huge responsibility to their constituents, their stockholders and their consumers and so on. And you have a crisis that takes place in the company, and they have sort of a CEO coup where they get rid of the existing CEO and they bring in a new CEO. Men don't usually make this kind of complaint, but this is done to them all the time. Like, all right, the entire ship is on fire. There's a big hole in the hull. We are actively taking on water, and there's an iceberg from hell heading our way. Fix it now. And that's it. That's what they get. And they better have ideas. They better hit the ground running, because otherwise, everything that was going on before they joined the organization, before they took the helm, it's all going to get blamed on them that it wasn't fixed. And so you have an example of a woman not handling that very well would be the female CEO of Reddit. I believe the female CEO of YouTube had similar issues. Hopefully we don't get her channel banned for saying that, because women are vindictive.
She got turbo cancelled last year, did she not?
Yeah, I think so.
Famously. They got
but
some Pajit in charge now. Oh shit, we're on YouTube. I shouldn't say that. That's fine.
But we do have like examples where women have not hit the ground running and then turned around and cried sexisms. This woman did not hit the ground running. And now's problems, honestly, in comparison, don't seem to have been that big. Right? They had apparently they had more racisms before she came in, and she could not fix them. So we still have the isms and the phobias, guys. We just don't know what to do about that. And in the biggest organization in the United States for women, for feminist women, that is, we have more racisms. So
yeah, and if you're brought in as a boss, like a CEO, or whatever, you generally are supposed to sink or swim.
yes,
You? Or you can't just sit there in the middle of the road going, "I'm just going to do nothing." Wait, what am I saying? That's exactly what they do, especially in lazy ass institutions like any feminist thing.
yep. Well, this stuff is supposed to work automatically, right? You show the tiers, and then the men in power give you the things. They give you the gibs, and like that's always worked for now, and a lot of other feminist organizations as well. But apparently, it's not working now. So the ladies are mad, hose mad. That period of crisis Nunes referred to, referenced, was an internal scandal first reported by the Daily Beast, also another lefty left news organization, very, very commie, in 2020. At the time, nearly a dozen individuals reported women of color being heckled, silenced, or openly disparaged at NOW meetings and offices, according to the Daily Beast.
I have a doubt. That's all I'm saying. Like I said, all feminist institutions at this point are intersectional. They've all moved into the next phase, in which white people are the worst and the less white you are,
Yeah.
the better. Not including Asians. That's this anomaly that we don't talk about. So, but they are encouraged to ramp up the victim mentality if and when they happen to be women of color. So I suspect that this is what's happening. There really wasn't much in the way of racism, but a feminist who's been trained in intersectional feminism saw her opportunity to play the victim for being non-white. I don't know.
Yeah, when your whole
crazy
organization
theory.
when your whole organization specializes in victim signaling for bucks, then I guess you get good at victim signaling. So the one bit of information that comes across to support the idea that there was at least a conflict with allegations of racism flying around is this: employees signed on to an internal letter accusing the organization's president at the time, Tony Van Pelt, of disparaging and sidelining women of color. So there was definitely at least some, internal conflict over this, and there were at least some women leveling the allegations.
There was certainly some bitching, some relational aggression. I mean, the more women you stuff into a room together, the more likely you are to get that. And that goes with organizations as well. They can't help, well, not all, hashtag not all, but yeah, feminist women in particular, especially when they're put in charge of something that's supposed to be feminist. Of course, they're going to do what spoiled female teenagers do, all day and night, as a matter of course. So yeah, that I'm certain that goes on, and probably because their ideology instructs them to be intersectionalist, i.e., non-white is better than white. There's a certain resentment that boils up around the water cooler.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's complicated. I'm just spitballing, trying to understand women here, and it's a fool's folly, as you well know.
Well, to paraphrase, the bickering will continue. There's nothing else. That's the whole statement. The bickering will continue. That's women in a nutshell. We do. That's all we do. Like everything else is just the icing on the completely stale and rotted cake of what women have become in the modern world right now, and it's beyond upsetting to see what women have turned into, because historically we have had capability of being, the other half of the team that created the best ways of life that we had in the world. And you had the men's team that was doing the heavy labor, the heavy lifting, the dirty jobs, the disgusting and degrading work, especially like sewer workers and the trash disposal system and all those things that we don't have to think about that stuff, right? And you had the women's side that was largely the support team. It's almost, like you can't run your race. You can't run your race in a race car if you don't have your mechanics ready to fix every little thing that goes wrong with your car, because you're pushing it past its limits. And that's essentially the way that our team worked throughout history until feminists came along and went, no, you know what? We have this monkey wrench toss. There we go. So 2 months after the Daily Beast report, Van Pelt resigned as now's president, citing health concerns. Anthony Huber asked, permanently retired skateboarder asked, if women held up half the sky, then are they half responsible when the sky comes crashing down? Yes, they are. They are as responsible. In fact, if only their half of the sky comes crashing down and the other half is still up there, guess who is 100% responsible? Because men can't hold up the entire sky if we're going to talk about it in communist terms. You can't.
I have on good authority that the sky is falling, and it's because men eat too much meat.
Yes, it's been falling for like 80 years or something like that now. And for the past 80 years, we've been going to run out of fish in the ocean in the next 10 years. It's been a very long-standing and huge crisis. We have to be very careful about that. One day my son came home from kindergarten. I mean, this is years ago, because my son is more than a quarter of a century old now, and that tells you how old I am. But he came home from kindergarten. He was very upset because they had something that they were reading. This was not science class, by the way. This was a reading assignment, and they had to answer questions. You read a paragraph, and then you answer questions about the paragraph to show that you understand your vocabulary, words, and context, that you were able to summarize what the paragraph said. Like, this is what was being told to you in the paragraph, and so on. And, that you had a good grasp of what you had just read. And they selected a paragraph that panic-mongered about overfishing, and that there would be no more fish left in the ocean, and the entire ocean, in the next 10 years, they're all going to be gone. And so we had to call Grandma and Grandpa and have a conversation with them, because they had that same conversation with me when I was in school. And I came home with something from my one of my science classes. We were overfishing the ocean, and there wasn't going to be a single fish left in the ocean in the next 10 years. And, I started paying attention. Before Al Gore said it, there were others before that had made this statement, and it goes back to at least the 1960s and the 1950s, because they were saying it to my parents when they were in school. The next 10 years, there won't be any fish in the ocean, and by the 21st century, the world will be so overpopulated that human beings will all be standing shoulder to shoulder, and nobody will have any space to move at the rate that we're reproducing. And of course,
in parts of China and Africa and India, that is almost the case. But let's just send them all to Europe. It'll be fine.
It's just because they're all living in the same. You could say that about New York too. Property prices in New York are really high because it's a small state. There's not a lot of property, and a lot of people have tried to squeeze into that little small space. But if you drive through Kansas, you discover that actually there's quite a bit of space left. If you drive through Nebraska, you realize that, yeah, there's quite a bit of space left. And if you drive around through Australia, holy shit, there's a lot of space left. But
it's great. It's just a shame that that space is slowly or quickly being filled up by this never-ending human fountain from the third world.
Yeah, it's also sinking into the pits of feminism as well. So, unfortunately, even countries where you're wealthy, if you have 2 chickens and a goat, are starting to sink into the pits of feminism. They have time for feminism there now. So they're not as poor as they used to be. Feminism needs money. They prey on places where there's money. Of course, a lot of that may be the U.S. AIDS infection from the humanitarian initiative veil that covers the world, where funding from the USAID system has sent organizations based in the United States all over the world to promote abortion and circumcision, child genital mutilation of the other variety as well, and so on. So we've been exporting feminism, and they've been making us pay for it for so long. Yeah, Derek Workman says, drive through Kansas. I would not advise that. It is incredibly boring. It's the space warp that exists. Like, you drive a couple of miles into Kansas, and the next thing you're in a space warp, and you just drive past the same mile. You drive through the same mile over and over again till you've gone the number of times there are miles going, in the state of Kansas. And then you come out the other side and you drive the last mile, and then you drive out of Kansas. So
the other end of the extreme, the other extreme is trying to drive through any city.
Yeah.
It's horribly stressful, and you quickly find yourself hating every human being in the world. You drive through the plains or the grassland, and you think, where are all the people? This is interminably boring. Where am I? Am I even on this planet?
You don't like driving 25 meters per hour?
I do not.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, there's a happy medium out here somewhere, folks, and it's the small towns. If only everything was a small town. We should demolish the cities and put small towns in their places, and then put more small towns in the plains. It'll be great.
Yep, I grew up in a small town. I can't say I was born in a small town. I was born in a small city or a big town. Lima, Ohio is a little different. It's like it's the biggest small town you'll ever visit, I think. But anyway, let's see here. So she cited health concerns, guys. She's like, yeah, I've been accused of racism. I think it's time for me to have some health problems. Nunes, who was vice president at the time, then took over as the organization's leader. So she wasn't elected. She's kind of got thrust into the limelight here. Oh gosh, now I'm in charge. Great. So she didn't come in with ideas necessarily because that's what she wanted to do, unless this was a coup. So she came in to the presidency as being as a black woman, not a regular black woman, but as a black woman. She came into the presidency riding the coattails of allegations of racism that caused Van Pelt to suffer sudden health problems and have to resign. So it's quite possible that this was a carefully orchestrated coup, because it sounds like the kind of thing that happens in women's circles. You have the rumors, and then you have the toppling of the queen bee, and then the first bee below the queen bee takes over. And a lot of times she does end up hated like this, but quite frequently when you have the queen bee getting toppled, it's because of rumors spread by the individual who's taking her place. We don't have any evidence other than the fact that this is pretty typical in women's groups, women's friendships, women's business organizations, women's health clubs, it just anywhere where the main movers and shakers in the group are a bunch of women. You get, somebody campaigning in the background. I think Susie's kind of allowing people to be racist to each other here in this group. I kind of think this thing is happening. I don't want to say anything, but you should watch and see. What do you think? And it gets this undercurrent going. And the next thing you know, there's all kinds of conflict. And it goes back to being Susie's fault. And Susie has been blindsided, has no idea what's going on, and ends up getting ousted from the entire group, excommunicated, so to speak. And then the person who quietly spread the rumors takes her place. So I kind of wonder about that. And if that's the case, and she started the toxicity, she's not going to solve it very easily. It's not going to stop just because she got what she wanted. And a lot of times the usurper bee does end up in this situation where, like, hey, why is everybody being so mean to me?
It's the old stereotype of men insult each other to their faces, and then when they go their separate ways, they go, "He's a great guy." Whereas women
Yeah.
will say, "I love you, you're so beautiful," to their face, but once they separate, they go, "She's such a bitch," which
Yep.
which works among small groups of women in, I would say, small towns. But when you put a bunch of these women together in one organization, without the mitigating property of having men in it,
Yeah.
God only knows what a toxic work environment. Because it's hard to say what toxic even means, but for God's sake, if it means anything, it's that.
Yeah. One difference with women in a small town that I've noticed is if they have deemed another woman an excellent mother, you get the in capitalized words here, the excellent mother stamp of approval from the other moms in the neighborhood. You don't get such a bitch behind your back. You get, is her daughter old enough to babysit our kids yet? And who that mom is, because as soon as her daughter gets old enough, which in the 1980s when I was growing up, if it was, I need to do some work outside, but I don't want to leave the kids alone in the house, that was, you could be 12 and be hired for that. And of course, if it was, I'm going someplace in town and I can leave a phone number that the babysitter can call me if there's an emergency and I can be home in 5 minutes. You could be 14. And if it was, I'm going to another community half an hour away, might not have a phone number, but I can call and check in throughout. You want them to be old enough to have a driver's license. So I started babysitting at 12. So I had that mom. And there were women that undermined her too. But it was, and honestly, they were bitches. They were horrible. But I think most of the women my mom knew, it was really hard to not like her. But so there is a thing to character, even with women. The women that hate women of good character are horrible, horrible people. Let's see. Despite the circumstances leading to Nunez's tenure as president, she said that her motivation to lead stemmed from Now's storied history, paving the way for major legal changes addressing women's economic and social equality. Sorry, guys, I'll be right back. Gotta go throw up. Um, I don't think that the National Organization Women had the history that they think they had. We had women's suffrage was achieved through a little bit of chicanery, a lot actually, and it was an act of overriding a lot of women who didn't want it. Very long process, a long march through the institutions is a thing, and also the social institutions, and then there wasn't there were little things here and there, but there weren't any huge victories again until the Equal Pay Act, and it really wasn't women's groups that got the Equal Pay Act passed. They were trying to tank the Equal Pay Act, which the Equal Pay Act wasn't about women, it was about race. They were trying to tank the Equal Pay Act, so they tacked women onto it, thinking that that would keep Republicans from voting for it, and it didn't work. Republicans voted for it anyway. In fact, if I remember right, that was another one of those issues where Republicans were ahead of Democrats. But yeah, there's not a significant amount of things in between that I would say were huge feminist victories. And both of those two victories were things that the establishment did for its own purposes, that feminists sort of rode the coattails of those and then said, look what we did for women. But yeah, there's storied history. She also saw the potential for her as a black woman. So again, we have the as a black woman, the as a cult, to strengthen the organization's approach to intersectionality, going beyond issues that affect women as a whole, with a W, and addressing more specific concerns that disproportionately affect women of color, as well as queer and trans women. So she was going to be the leader of the Intersectionalist National Organization for Women. Nunes stated that while she believes a majority of NOW's members remain invested in this inclusive vision, there's a core, a small group, that are really just really horrible and really toxic.
I'm so shocked. I'm taken aback. I cannot believe what you're saying.
It's very, very difficult. Sorry, I've been in so many groups of gals that all it takes is one. You don't need 50 toxic women to destroy a group of women from the inside. I'm surprised, honestly, with feminists, because it's such a toxic environment to begin with. These organizations, their whole existence is about complaining and portraying themselves as victims of hate and oppression and everything. And the more victim points you have, right, the higher your status. So I'm surprised that feminist groups have lasted as long as they have without self-destructing. And it's got to be partly due to the fact that
They
the establishment,
men, yeah.
yeah, the establishment is the support system for feminism. It's really that we have gone over this too. Previous episodes of HBR Talk, we discussed an article from a magazine called Heterodox Magazine, which, if you look up what heterodoxy is, it's not about sexuality. Heterodoxy is basically the norm. What is the norm, right? So the magazine is essentially about what is the norm. And they did an issue on, they did a couple of stories in various issues about the history of feminism and women's studies. But the article, Women's Studies Imperialists, traced how women's studies became a thing in the United States. And you could see the fingerprints of the business establishment and the big charity establishment, basically the rich people establishment, in the Ford Foundation and several other rich people foundations that funded this, and government grants that got put into it, that feminism is mostly funded, promoted, maintained, and scaffolded, really, by the establishment. It's on life support, constant life support. If you take away establishment funding and feminism had to actually appeal to the citizenry, the whole concept would just die. Let's see. Her complaints about the organization focused on her needs as the mother of a young child with autism and alleged disrespectful treatment from a few individuals on NOW's 18-member national board.
I'm waiting to see what that's got to do with anything.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though. I tried to look up NOW's 18-member national board because I thought, well, this is a publicly funded nonprofit organization that is involved in the legislative process as a lobbying group, and it's involved in influencing politics through influencing things like the Women's March and other protests that take place, does a lot of letter writing campaigns, does a lot of submitting amicus briefs to court cases and stuff like that. So you would think that their board membership would be public, but I actually had a lot of difficulty finding it. I couldn't get the board members, nothing about their names or anything. The only thing I could get was an article on who was running to become a member of the National Organization for Women's Board in 2024. So they're having an election for the board this year too. So they're kind of anonymous. It's a little more difficult. Their website does not have on their about information the list of board members. It has, the president and the vice president, but that's it. So it's quite interesting to find that out too. The 19th reached out to Now for a response to Nunes's statements. Now, remember, her name is Christian. This confused me when I first read it. A press person for the organization said they are unable to comment because the person who would respond is Christian. And at first I thought, are they saying they can't say anything because they're going to get a response back from a Christian? And then I had to go back and look, wait a minute, that's her first name. So the board, their cop-out was, we can't answer that because our spokesperson is the person that's complaining about us. And so we can't answer the complaint. So they can't come up with another spokesperson just for the board to answer for the board. They don't have like any other hierarchy besides here's the president and here's the board. Nobody wanted to say anything.
Maybe it's both, because she's Christian and Christian, and so we can't trust her because she's Christian and because she's Christian.
Maybe.
The rest of us are all feminists, remember, which is a completely different religion.
There you go. Well, I for a while infiltrated a Facebook group for feminist atheists with an alt account just to see what kind of stupid things. They had a lot of stupid things to say. Most of them weren't really show material, but it was kind of interesting. But the last time I logged into that account, probably because I never posted anything in the group, I got booted. So they decided I was a non-participating member of the group, and they didn't need me in there, which was kind of...
In other words, you're a kind of atheist. You're an atheist of that particular ideology.
They didn't feel like they had my enthusiastic consent. That's what it was. So yeah. So they couldn't come up with another person to respond to the complaints of the most powerful person in their organization about how other members of the organization were mistreating her. And yeah. Nunes, she said, holds the top position for the main organization as well as Now's charitable foundation and its political action committee. Nunes first became Now's vice president in May 2019 after the organization's board abruptly removed Gilda Yazzie, an indigenous woman and member of the Navajo Nation, from the position. Yazzie later filed a lawsuit against Now, alleging discrimination and harassment. I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Does that trump Asa black woman? Does
yes.
Asa Native American trump Asa black woman? I think it does. I'm not sure.
Yes, she is a higher level member of the Asa cult. I would say she is definitely a higher degree member of the Asa cult.
Definitely more endangered, if that's what it's all
about. Yes, we definitely need to, like, it's got to have our own environment within the office. That level of, oh my gosh, we can't have this member of the Asa cult go extinct. Nunes said she had just given birth to her son, Van Pelt. When Van Pelt approached her about the vice presidency with a promise that Nunes would have 12 weeks of maternity leave and could work remotely for the rest of the year before moving from her home in Arizona to NOW's headquarters in Washington, D.C. in January 2020, which sounds reasonable considering that they push for every woman in the country, regardless of what type of work she does, to have that. And they pushed for the Family and Medical Leave Act, I believe 1994. That was a Bush senior thing that I think actually Clinton's one that ended up. No, it was 1990. Anyway, it's been a while. It's been, for most of the time, I worked before FMLA, but for most of the time I've been working, FMLA has been in effect. I have to go back and look up when that happened now. But one of the things that they put in it, that they insisted on, especially in later incarnations of it, was a period of time where you couldn't be fired for taking maternity leave. Now, they wanted paid maternity leave for all women everywhere, whatever workplace they were in, no matter what. So if you were, whether you were a cashier at a convenience store or a firefighter, or you worked in an office somewhere, or like my job, I am a member of a team of 9, basically. So I'm more than 10% of the team, and if I took that much time off, which I did have to take 5 weeks off at one point, and it was insane trying to deal with that, because filling 5 weeks like that is just, and I had FMLA for it, but it was really rough on my employer. And I've had coworkers that have taken that time off, and it's been really rough on the employer. And what the result has been is a lot of us that work for that employer have done quite a bit of overtime, like enough to where it's affecting our health, to make up for that situation, because the employer has a bigger team that doesn't necessarily all work in my particular division. And so they're considered a big enough employer that they have to abide by FMLA. And it is a major burden, not just on the employer, but on the colleagues, when you have an actual small specialized team dealing with one specialized location or area, and 11%, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to do the math right now, but more than 10% of the team isn't there for 5 weeks. And the company gives 8 weeks for maternity leave. Fortunately, I'm old enough that that's not a factor for me. They give, you can take 8 weeks. It's not paid, but if you really build up paid time off in my company. But a lot of companies have been pressured into offering that paid time off for maternity leave as a separate thing. You can take this PTO for maternity leave, and you can only use it for maternity leave. And men don't really necessarily get an equivalent in a lot of those companies, but they don't get some other benefit to make up for not getting an equivalent either. So they're just kind of SOL. And when you think about, that's 2 months pay just for 8 weeks. And then they push for 12 weeks. That's 3 months. 3 months pay, essentially. That they're talking about the employer give women for not working at all during that time, and hold their job while they're paying another person to do that job. So she was promised this maternity leave. She was promised that she could work the rest of the year from home. And then after her appointment, this is also, by the way, during the shutdown, 2020. Right? So a lot of people were working it was normal to work from home if you did anything that you could just do remotely by computer. I couldn't do that because I work in healthcare.
Except politicians and world leaders, by the way. They could very easily have their G20 and their G8 summits remotely.
Yeah, but they still voted remotely. in Congress.
But when they had to meet each other, no, we all need fucking 20 private jets for that shit.
Yep.
Of course.
Oh, they can't all ride together, you know.
Families
Unseemly.
don't need to be together. Teachers and students don't need to be together. But when politicians who need translators anyway,
There we go.
They need to get a bunch of private jets and meet somewhere in the middle of fucking nowhere. Still pissed off about that. I'll never not be pissed off.
Yeah, I that's one thing that we've been pointing that out too for a long time. Going and a lot of people on the right have been pointing it out, like that are specifically just on the right rather than critics of all things everywhere. But the right has been pointing out things like, Al Gore had this whole thing about environmentalism, and he also had this giant mansion that used as much electricity as a small town. So you gotta, if you're gonna talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk. Like I guarantee you, I've never had an abortion. I'm pro-life. I think abortion is wrong. So I have never had an abortion. Right? It's pretty much the way you live, the way you say everybody should live. And you don't live one way and tell everybody, well, but you, the masses, are not important enough to be able to break these rules. So I'm gonna use my small town's worth of electricity, but you have to have rolling blackouts and your heat gets shut off in the middle of the wintertime in the northern part of a state that spans almost the entirety of the coast of the country, where in the northern part it gets cold and wet in the wintertime. But
It doesn't include socialists, of course. Religious people say, I believe in charity, and so I pay to charity. Socialists go, I believe in wealth distribution, and so you all have to distribute your wealth.
Yes, we're going to redistribute your wealth, not theirs.
What mansion? This isn't a mansion. What? Shut up.
We got 37 rooms. Come on. Like, it's not 99. After her appointment to the presidency, however, the tone shifted, Nunes said. Now's leadership allegedly told her she needed to work for 6 months before taking maternity leave. Oh yes, you can start out with maternity leave. That's fine. You can start out with that and then work from home. No, you got to wait 6 months. Well, the baby's a baby now. Oh, sorry. You still got to wait 6 months. She began traveling for work 6 weeks after giving birth. She said board members also pressured her to move to D.C. sooner. She relocated in September 2019. After Van Pelt resigned in 2020 and Nunes took over, she said that she had continued to face pressures that conflicted with her ability as a single mother to care for her son. So we don't know why she's a single mother. She may be a single mother by a circumstance. She may be a single mother by choice. The majority of children born out of wedlock today, if I understand correctly, are born to single mothers by choice. Like, now, technically, in my opinion, in the United States, where abortion is legal, and we also, before you get to conception, we have like 11 different categories of birth control and multiple iterations of each of those types of birth control. I think Pearl Davis said it totals out to something like 40 different things that women can choose from. I consider all out of wedlock births to be single mothers by choice, especially if she retains custody, because you also have safe haven abandonment. The father should have custody. You have even, although most women, I think, they don't have the wisdom to opt for that like they should. But you also have your family is there, and you have the adoption system that has both open and closed adoptions. So if a woman in 21st century America conceives a child, whether it by IVF or with a man through sex, if she conceives a child, retains the pregnancy, and goes through the entire gestation period, however far before she delivers and gives live birth, and then retains custody after the birth, that's single motherhood by choice. Because there's a whole series of choices that you made there, a whole bunch of them, including not just the initial, do I have abortion or not, but do you have sex? Who do you have it with? What kind of relationship do you have with this person? What level of trust? What type of commitment? And then also the birth control choices, and then if after conception the abortion choice, and then after that choice is made, the adoption and other custodial choices. So it's hard to call any woman oppressed by this situation, and especially if she's the president of the National Organization for Women, right? She's the leader of the organization that preaches to the rest of us what we should be doing, how far we should be opening our wallets to pay for those women's choices, to pay for their choice to be careless with sex and then retain custody after giving live birth. That it's on us to make sure that their kids are taken care of, because clearly they're not doing it, and therefore it's the father's fault. And anybody who works even remotely like a man should be paying taxes into a system that funds childcare and cash assistance and food stamps and healthcare and free housing and utilities payments and car repairs and refrigerator, and there's like 100 different programs you can apply for if you're an under the poverty level single mom, right? And if she's at the other end of it and she's actually a well-to-do IVF single mom, and she chose to be part of this organization, right? They didn't like go down the street in Arizona where she lived and like, look, a random black woman, let's get her, put a net over her head, drag her into now headquarters. Ha ha, you are now a member of the National Organization for Women, and we're going to make you the vice president. You have to work. They didn't do that, right? She had to have worked her way into that position. She must have done other jobs before this, because they don't usually, like, they wouldn't make me president of jack shit right now. I don't have a degree in anything. I don't have any management experience. I haven't been in government. Nobody would look at me and say, this is president material. Like, nobody in their right mind would look at me and say, this is president. If they did, I would tell them, you're crazy, and no, I'm not going to do that job. I wouldn't know where to begin to do that job. It's not my thing. Okay. If the country has a runny nose, I'll help. If the country needs a president, no. But she got the job of vice president, right? She had qualifications from somewhere. So she knows how work is. She chose to work with this organization, and she chose to seek out that position. I have no sympathy at all right now.
Yeah. As someone who talks online about things, there's always the occasional fucking swamp rat who says, why aren't you doing anything? All you're doing is complaining for profit. You should be doing something. And this invariably comes from someone who also isn't doing anything. They're literally just complaining in a comment below my complaints. And I'm like, look, I'm someone, I knew from the earliest of ages that what I wanted to do with my life was dick around making funny videos. Like from pre-puberty, I already knew what I wanted to do, and it was dick around making funny videos. But in my mid-adulthood, it occurred to me that there are serious political problems in the world, like the plight of men and whatnot. And so I incorporated that into the comedy routines that I do in my silly, funny videos. Because even though all I ever wanted to do was dick around being funny, I'm like, actually, no, this is quite serious. I'm still going to dick around doing funny videos, but I'm going to actually address these issues. And apparently that's still not enough. People are like, be a politician. I said, no, I'm not going to be a fucking politician. There are people out there who have always wanted to be politicians, and I'm going to leave it to them. Why don't you fucking bug them about not doing enough? Like this when we were talking about in this show, like all of these people who have gone directly into the business of changing the world, and all they do is fuck everyone over. And like, I've still got people fucking giving me shit for not doing enough when the people who promised the world that they would change it for the better are only changing it for the worst. And you guys are out here yelling at a fucking comedian for actually doing what you want him to do. And again, all you're doing is fucking appearing in comments and yelling angrily at me and still not doing anything. Are you a politician? Anonymous fucking commenter below all my videos. What are you doing? Oh, nothing at all. Yeah, you're yelling at the person who's yelling at the people that you want to yell at. Is fucking mind-boggling. It's someone in the world should do something, but not me. That's what it is.
Yeah, you know who has more power than politicians? Commentators. Somebody once asked Rush Limbaugh why he didn't run for president, because obviously, you know, in Rush's opinion, he had all the best ideas and knew how everything should be done. And he said that he had much more influence over politics in this country as a commentator than he would have as a holder of any office, because he had the power to sway the masses. And there's an interesting thing with working as a commentator. You don't have to have an audience of millions to affect the opinions of millions. What you have to do is find a part of the pool of human conversation, thought, belief systems, and so on. You just find an area that is deep and wide, and you drop a pebble in it that's just big enough and heavy enough that the ripples really move, or you skim something across the top that creates a whole set of ripple sets going further across the pond. And one of the things that being a commentator on the internet has allowed is our audience isn't just in the country where we live. In fact, Mike and I are across the ocean from each other. So we're hitting the pond from both sides, double teaming it, so to speak, right? And we've had comments from people that let us know that we have listeners on every continent that people live on. That we know about anyway, that people live on. And it does create, we talk about stuff, people think about what we've said, and they respond to it. They may talk about it among their friends, they may talk about it among their family members, and they respond to it, they think about it, and again, there's that ripple effect. And so you're creating essentially a big push on the Overton window of this is what is the common belief. in the world right now, or that is what the common belief in the world is right now. And as a result, this election, when men outvoted women on opposing Trump because they thought he was going to solely go after abortion for some reason, we got blamed. Like we're told that we're nobody, that we do nothing, we have no effect on the world, right? But when the election didn't go feminist way, it was men's rights activists that they started blaming. Men's rights activists voted in the bad orange man that we all hate because he's going to do terrible things. And when we the next thing that we're going to go over after this article, which isn't going to be tonight, we've got the National Organization for Women has this list of evils that Trump has proposed or is doing. I'll give you a little preview here of the great list of evils. The Trump administration's policies harming women as of May 5, 2025, in reverse chronological order. So there you go. But that's a taste of the future. We're still not done with this article, which won't go. There it goes. That it won't go back to. But yeah, I don't buy into when people say, "Oh, you don't do anything because you're a commentator." Commentators actually have quite a bit of influence, and the reason that they attack commentators as do-nothings is because they do not like our influence. And you do not have to be a major commentator or a widely known commentator. You can be a commentator from the shadows that doesn't get stalked by scary people for being a commentator, doesn't get swatted, doesn't get, well, we've been doxxed and we've been swatted, but only once. And we were in a public park, so it was a lot harder for him to swat us. But in any case, doesn't usually deal with the level of things that, say, the big names have to deal with, and still have quite a bit of influence, accomplish quite a bit of change of the public discourse over a short amount of time. And I think the commentators of the men's rights movement, even from back when most men's issues commentary was on blogs, it still had a profound effect. And it has had a profound effect over the last 20 years, to where what has been sort of a niche area of politics that people barely understand is now mainstream. We're not establishment. We are actually mainstream. What often gets called mainstream, people use the word mainstream when they mean establishment. That's not the mainstream. It's not the general consensus of the regular public. It's what the establishment is trying to oppose on the regular public. But I'm actually in person seeing in places that I'd never seen these kinds of issues discussed before, like right in my community, right in my last several workplaces, among my friends and family, seeing consensus change and people noticing men's issues and noticing the unfairness in the court system and the way that men get treated like they're disposable and so on. And it's not something that people really had a lot of, they didn't take a lot of notice of it in the past. So yeah, commentators do a lot. They do, and we're hated for it. That said, I like to shove it in a lot of people's faces when they oh, you don't do anything, you're just a commentator. Well, actually, I've gone to court with several falsely accused men, sat in court, and been the eyeballs that keep the judge honest. I've been able to report on a couple of those, but not all of them. And there have been several instances where I've given advice as well that has been followed and has been the reason why somebody got custody of his kids, or why somebody didn't make a big mistake in his court battle. So just because of having seen what women do in those cases. Let's see.
There's no telling how much of this movement we were instrumental in starting, because we've been doing this since,
Yeah, well,
what is it now, 12 years ago? And
yep,
I've
and
voiced for men before us. Like,
yeah, there was a very big movement actually before us.
yeah, history has already forgotten us. God knows how much history has already forgotten what came before us. But
Yeah,
we were there. Like, fucking Sargon wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Karen. He has admitted to this at one point, and it's the case for so many people, because Karen really did get in there first and sort of blow up, more than anyone else, really, on YouTube.
yeah.
And she's part of Honey Badger Radio, by the way.
She's the gateway drug. Well, she's one of the founders, right? She's the gateway drug to the men's rights movement. She gets referred to as that all the time.
Indeed,
So,
but you won't hear about this from the fucking feminist cabals that run the internet, because they've done everything they can to bury us, because they know we're the OGs.
yeah. Well, when they talk about her, they try to subtly undermine her appearance. They sort of try to make her out to be half redneck, half freak. Because, like, for instance, Karen likes to wear tank tops. And there's a particular type of tank top for women that has its own built-in bra. And a lot of us like those. They're comfortable. And you just put it on and you're dressed. You don't have to put on a bra and then your shirt, and you have to worry about your straps showing and all the things that, like, Gen Xers, we don't like our straps showing for the most part. We don't run around showing off our bras. I noticed that there's a lot of today's fashion that, you have your bra sticking out of your shirt for some reason. But we grew up seeing that in magazines, but being embarrassed about it in real life. So we wouldn't even talk about it, right? If your classmate had a strap showing, you didn't tell her that. You quietly said your integrity is showing. And everybody, every woman nearby knew that, she needed to tug her shirt collar back over the bra strap. But those tank tops are nice because it's all built in. You don't have to, prevent any accidents, any fashion wardrobe, wardrobe malfunctions. They do wear out, which really sucks. Like the video I made that has the most views on my old channel, I didn't realize that my black tank bra, like the whole thing, it's the bra tank. It's a regular tank top, goes all the way down. It's not cropped. It goes all the way down to the pants, but it looks like a bra in that video because of the framing. And it was lower than I wanted it to be. So that I've never wanted to replace that video though, because the message in it spread rather far and wide, and I don't want to take it down because of that. But those are comfy, right? But when I think it was Marie Claire, it might have been some other. We've had a few places cover Honey Badger Radio. When they described Karen's tank tops, they didn't say that. They called them wife beaters. Like, that is actually a racist term.
Wait, what?
I don't know if people realize, but it's not just a sexist term, because men's undershirts that are that are that particular shape, where they have like the low neckline and the really open armpits, those were an Italian favorite. And you see a lot of the stereotypical portrayal of like Italian gangsters and stuff like that in just those those tank tops.
Oh,
Like
those were
big,
those have been quite big in the UK for some time,
yeah.
even the northern parts of the UK where it's
Well,
quite
yeah,
hot.
because they're a nice, modest thing to wear under a shirt that is somewhat see-through.
I mean, men don't wear them anymore because they're called wife beaters.
Yeah, they kind of killed the industry, but they got started being called that because of that stereotype of the I can't think of the way to describe this, but the what's that show that has Snooki? What's the name of
Jersey
that show?
Shore.
Yeah,
Jersey
the
Shore?
Jersey Shore type stereotype and the older stereotypes of like the mafioso that's this old fashioned don't talk to me about my business and hits this woman and blah blah blah. Like that's where the wife beater thing, sort of that reputation came about. And it does target Italian men and at least from my memory of it, to that taking hold as an actual term, wife beater for the actual shirt, and not men who beat their wives. Um, that's who that was targeting, because that's the only people I ever saw anybody say it about. Oh, he's wearing a wife beater, you know. So it's like that's to me. Yeah, blue collar working class Italian men, Meredith G says. And I just so I think I view that as a racist term, and I won't use it. I hate that term for those tank tops anyway. I think it's an insult to men, even if it's not racist. And it's definitely classist. So Chris Mizuno says, more recently, there's been a resurgence in the popularity of white tank tops, often referred to with terms like wife pleaser or wife blesser. Well, wife pleaser is a good one because I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the sexiest things you can do is show us your back, right? And your shoulders. Just that span of a guy's shoulders and that area of the neck that you can see the trapezius muscle and the sternocleidomastoid, if he's working his jaw or something. One of the sexiest parts of a guy, even though, everybody likes your eyes and everybody likes your abs and everybody likes, the glutes and the biceps. It's really underrated to show off your back. People don't realize how much fun it is to just look at a guy from behind and just see the span of his shoulders. And it's because women, our shoulders aren't that big. And most of us, even if we have like the straight across, I got the straight across shoulders. I got the, I don't have the coat hanger shoulders, right? I've got the rack shoulders for it's the exomorph body type. But even I don't have big, strong shoulders like a guy. And so it's something we don't have. So it's extra sexy because of that.
This was something I asked my my first ever girlfriend because it happened to come up in conversation. What she thinks my most attractive body part is, and she said my back. And we didn't know how to take it at the time because it sounds like a literally backhanded compliment. But it's probably because my back is hairless, but my front is quite hairy. I think that's the best combination you can have because nobody likes a hairy back. Let's be honest. But yeah, but it's not the back; it's the shoulders, isn't it? If you're a skinny motherfucker with shoulders 2 inches apart, then your back's probably not very attractive. I think the back is just the window to the shoulders.
Even then, if you're in decent shape, it's still sexier than a woman's back. At least from the perspective of a woman who is attracted to men. But since I'm also attracted to women, there are different areas of a woman that I find attractive than areas of a man. So, but in any case, yeah. The term became associated with a specific type of undershirt after a 1947 case where a man arrested for beating his wife was pictured wearing a white undershirt. Yeah. But in any case, yeah, I think that it's still really sneaky that they referred to her tank top as a wife beater.
Anyway, we've gone off on many
Yeah.
tangents just now. Let's get back
So
to it.
we'll read a little bit more of this, and then we will close out for the patron-only after show. And I've been going through a interesting conversation on the Patreon-only after show. I'll explain a little bit more about that after this next couple of paragraphs. I think there is actually... we'll stop at the picture, and then I'll know next week to start at that picture. Let's see. Yeah, they told her she was on 24/7 and she had difficulty accepting that, right? And of course, what got us started on this was talking about feminists pushing for women to have all this time off and all these caterings to their needs, their work-life balance needs in their workplace. But the most prominent, whether it's the biggest or the oldest, it is the most prominent, the most widely known organization for feminist women in the United States doesn't do that for the women that work for the organization, apparently. Additionally, Nunes said she repeatedly faced heated questions from some board members about her decision-making and pressure to quickly resolve long-standing issues at the organization that she inherited as president, which we kind of covered by talking about the CEO issue. Like, this is pretty much par for the course if you become the CEO of an organization that asked you to be the CEO because the previous CEO created a bunch of problems and then went kaput, or they got rid of them. Then you're going to be asked to solve them all immediately. It's kind of an expected thing, and you have to either be able to put the kibosh to that or weather it. This questioning extended to Nunes' efforts to improve Now's financial management processes, she said. Nunes, who has a Master of Business Administration degree, said she brought in a third-party financial controller to provide checks and balances to the financial management and to address needs like the group's account reconciliation. This sounds like a problem with the government. This is exactly... So she doged them. And they got mad. As a result, Nunes said she saw constant attacking of her credibility and leadership. She doged them, and the women bitched because she took actual control of the purse strings.
Ain't that
She made them account for their spending.
Isn't that just the way that life goes down, down, down? Moving way too fast, but way too slow. What song is that? That song's just jumped in. You have to look that up. Sorry.
I have to think about that. But in any case, it's just kind of funny to me that the women's organization got mad because their president added a little accountability to the process of spending in their organization. I wonder how much fraud was taking place there. So Terry O'Neill, who served as president of Now from 2009 to 2017, told the 19th that she witnessed some of this behavior firsthand. O'Neill and Nunes first connected after Nunes became president. Nunes asked O'Neill to join her presidential advisory committee, which gave her access to communications and meetings between Nunes and Now's board. O'Neill noted that she was personally impressed with how Nunes handled the finances. After about 4 quarters, we started getting financial reports that had graphs and charts, and were so clear and easy to understand, and you could just breeze through the financial reports, O'Neill said. I was like, wow, this woman is for real. So all this time they didn't have that. Like, how were they keeping? Were they using an abacus in the basement? But I just picturing this. She revamped the entire organization with Lotus. I'm sorry about that. Or what's the popular tax software that just like went belly up? She she made spreadsheets and graphs and stuff. After about 4 years, we started getting financial reports that had graphs and charts, or 4 quarters. Sorry. So this organization has been around since 1966. They had those kind of things, by the way, in 1966. You just did it on paper. You didn't have you had to draw it. You know, like there were computers and there was computer software, but not everybody had something that sophisticated. But they did have, like, accounting has existed for a very long time, as long as there's been business. This is insane. But on multiple occasions, O'Neill said, I just can't get past this. I'm sorry. They had all that time in their financial reports. Were they writing them on stone tablets? But on multiple occasions, O'Neill said she had to pop off and call board members out for what she viewed as flat-out racism against Nunes. I never experienced the level of hostility and sustained hostility that Christian experienced, O'Neill said. You want people to criticize you, you need that as a president, because it makes you better. But if you are gratuitously attacked, all it does is raise your cortisol levels. It's very bad for your health, pushes your blood pressure up.
Okay, so the plot thickens. It wasn't racism, my darling. You deigned to try and be efficient.
Yeah.
in trimming the fat, so to speak. And you can't just trim the fat when it comes to non-government organizations. Is the NOW and non-government? It sounds like one. It sounds like,
yeah, it's not a governmental organization, so it has to be considered a non-government.
Sounds like the kind of thing that would benefit from USAID or something analogous to it. So yeah, it wasn't racism. You tried to slimline what the organization was actually doing, and that's why they ousted you. But you still couldn't help yourself. You had to lead with, "They hate me because I'm black."
Yep. Not because they were doing their financial reports with a Ouija board last year, and this year you're actually using accounting software and actually demonstrating where the money went so they can keep track of who's spending what on what. Like, really. For the next week, your homework is to think of the most outlandish way the National Organization for Women might have been doing their accounting before the lady that actually knew what she was doing came along. I can't get over this. That we actually had charts and graphs. You guys don't understand. My family ran a business for years. They had a photography business, and even just the simple accounting that you do for a one family business, if you didn't actually use some sort of software or work with an accountant, deal with some accountability, you end up in jail. So it just blows my mind that they were mad at her for instilling accounting and accountability with regard to their spending. How does this organization survive? What do their board meetings look like? Seances? Maybe it's that.
Never mind graphs and charts. How does the number 7 make you feel? That's what it came down to, right?
Don't ask how much we spent on travel last year, and don't ask where we went. There was very good reason for going to that island that has male prostitution, young male prostitution. We went there for something else. Just don't ask. Right? We did an episode a while back on female sex tourism. It's really repulsive stuff to look at. Very repulsive information, actually. But yeah, so for the next week, comment below and tell us what you think. What bizarre, strange method, just totally unorthodox method, since they were not using normal accounting practices to keep track of their finances. What was the national organization doing with their money, and how did they keep track of their budget before Nunes came along and taught them how to use numbers? And everybody got mad at her for it. But in the meantime, let's see, we don't have any super chats, or Rumble rants that I can see. So if there is something like in the back room that I can't see, then Brian's gonna have to let me know. But I think usually if it gone through, it's visible in the restream chat, which I have up and I can see it. Or if it's Super Chow, it's visible in our Discord chat, and I can see it, but there is nothing. So before anybody gets in a last minute one that doesn't post until after we leave.
It was Lutricia McNeil. Ain't that just the way?
Okay.
Ain't that just the way that life goes down? Moving much faster, way too slow. I did have to look it up. All right.
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. But I'm not going to sing it because I'm not in really good shape right now. It is allergy season, which means for me in Ohio, 4/5 of the year. So, but I refuse to move. I have too many friends and family here. What we're going to do in our Patreon only after show, I've been going through a conversation I had with Grok on X, and that's actually the previous incarnation of Grok, before the one that we have now. And I've started to figure out that the way that Grok responds to you indicates some interesting things about how it gathers its information, forms its conclusions that it's going to tell you when you're asking about subject matter, and feeding it information, and how it incorporates that new information then into later questions and answers. And so we've been going through that conversation in the Patreon only after show for a few weeks, and looking at what my part of the conversation does, and what I intended to test or question with what I said in my side of the conversation, and then what the result came back with each section of the conversation. And it's the guys have been pretty interested in it. So we still have quite a bit of well, actually, I don't think there's that much of it left, because we're pretty good part of the way through it. But we still have a few sections of it left, and that's what we're going to be doing in the Patreon only after show tonight. And if you want to be part of our Patreon only after shows, or if you want to be part of our Discord, the place to go, like I pointed out at the beginning of the show, we'll point it out at the end of the show, is honeybadgerbrigade.com. And you go to the drop-down menu at the top of the page, you'll find feedthebadger.com. And on feedthebadger.com, you can join the Honey Badgers. There are various levels of funding that you can help us with, and it's really the lower levels still get you into the exclusive Discord as part of our community, and you can choose specific levels to participate in different after shows or Patreon only after shows. you can listen to the after shows, or there's other levels where you can actually be in the live show chat during the after show and actually take part in the discussion on the show. So check us out. You can keep track of all our stuff at honeybadgerbrigade.com. You can find feedthebadger.com at honeybadgerbrigade.com, the one-stop shop there. And with that, I will thank everybody for listening. And thanks, Mike, for going through this article with me. It's a bit of a nutty situation, and I think there's a lot hidden in there.
Indeed.
But what were you saying?
Just a bunch of pleasantries.
Just a bunch of pleasantries. Those are good. We get a lot of bullshit here, so pleasantries are the best. And thanks to the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, for doing the background work, where I just have not kept up with the technology, and I probably won't get an opportunity to do so for at least a few months, based on the way things are going with my regular job. So there we go. We will see you all next Thursday. Good night.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.